The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, download the Living Zen-podcast app for iPod, iPhone, and Android. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by becoming a part of our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at zenwest.ca and click on Become an Associate. Many more Zen Talks are available for purchase on iTunes and Amazon.com. Just search for Venerable Eshu Martin. These talks are also available for free on our website to all members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. Earlier today, Keegan, my son, asked me a question. And it's kind of a simple question on its surface, but those are often the hardest kind to answer. So he said, so, Dad, what's Zen all about? That's a tough question. But I think it's something that we all ought to ask. Maybe we all wonder it sometimes. And for me, who has to sit on this seat and answer questions, give talks, I think it's a good question to contemplate. I think one way of understanding Zen, I may have spoken about this a little bit before, is that it's this practice of maturation, growing up. Each of us, I think, as we grow up, when we're children, we're growing up, we start by developing an idea of who it is that we are. What are our likes and dislikes? We're affected by our conditioning, our family relationships, and our environment. And we become this person that I call I, me, this body. And this is good. It's an important thing for us to develop this sense of who we are in a finite way, this sense of self. But as we continue to develop, as we continue to grow up, this limited sense of self, this who I am as a body, very quickly it becomes clear that this body, this identity, this I, doesn't cover it. This I, these set of limitations that I place upon myself, what I will and won't do, what I like and don't like, what I want and want to be rid of, we can feel the constriction, we can feel the limitation, we can feel the isolation that attaching or fixating to this I creates. In fact, according to the teachings of Buddhism, this attachment, this fixation with who it is that I think I am, is the very root of suffering. So we take up practice. Many of us take up a practice when we become more and more aware of our day-to-day suffering, not the big problems that are imposing upon us at some given time in our life, but just the day-to-day fundamental dissatisfaction, discomfort. How in each and every day we find something isn't quite right and we aren't able to be at rest in the activity of our lives. We come to practice. And from the beginning of our practice, we are encouraged, we are given the method, the environment, the opportunity to awaken by the simple practice of sitting, paying attention to our breath, bringing all of our senses in a balanced way into this activity that is unfolding before us. We can experience, we can witness this barrier between inside and outside melt away. We can have this experience that this idea that we're fundamentally separate from the world around us, we can experience this dissolving. As we sit and listen to the sound of rain, of thunder, we can have this experience that this sound isn't happening outside of me. It isn't happening independently of me. The sound, the physical sensation, the things that I'm seeing are nothing other than myself. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do than this single activity. In the beginning, this realization can be thrilling, very exciting, but it can also be quite frightening and overwhelming. This experience that I'm not separate from the world around me, that I am intimately related, in relationship with all things in this vast cosmos, carries with it a tremendous responsibility. When I deeply experience this relationship, then I can't ignore how I act anymore. I can't ignore how what I do impacts other human beings, other beings of all kinds, the earth, the air, all things in this vast cosmos. As we continue to practice, this awareness deepens. It's not just an idea, it's not just a concept, but it becomes our basic understanding, our basic foundation for relationship in this world. This is the realization aspect of Zen practice. And in many ways, this is the easy part. For many people, it doesn't even take very long for us to have small or larger experiences of this interpenetrating relationship between what I call me and all things in this vast cosmos. Awakening, kensho, Satori. There's all kinds of different names for this kind of experience. And it's the easy part. What comes next is a lifetime of practice in accepting the responsibility of this realization. When we're sitting in a balanced environment, supported in this practice, supported in this experience and realization, we're not acting so much. So we're able to sit and immerse ourselves in the activity that's taking place around us. As we sit listening to the rain, it isn't difficult to manifest harmoniously with the sound of the rain. But as we stand up, and as we leave this place of formal practice and go out into our day-to-day lives, we find that we have old habits, ways of being in which this barrier, this fixated idea of self and other asserts itself. We go on making preferences and choices based on the idea that we are somehow fundamentally separate. We turn away from the responsibility of being one with all things. And when we're engaged in practice, the practice that we're engaged in is to pay attention, little bit by little bit, to awaken to the whens and wheres that I am making this fixated choice. When I'm acting out of this idea of a self that is separate. As I said, the first thing that develops is this awareness. First, we have to become aware of where it is that we're becoming attached, where it is that we fall into the ruts of our life, our ruts of our habit, being attached, thinking of the world as something outside. But even this awareness isn't enough. As we become aware of our habits, as we become aware of the ways that we get attached to thinking of ourself and other, we then begin to practice letting go. Letting go into the activity that is arising. This is something that we practice as we sit. We can watch as we sit, or as we walk, or as we chant. We can watch the way that we attach to ourselves, thinking about me, other. And we can watch what happens as we let go of this and completely engage with the activity that's manifesting in this moment. As we walk forward into life, our Zen practice doesn't change. It becomes more varied, sometimes more complex. But essentially, it's no different. Paying attention to how we make relationship, how we interact with people, with other beings, with our environment, and transforming this world of division to a world of unification. This isn't a a thing that makes us holy. It's not something that makes us good. It's not something that makes us better or more. This activity, this practice, is simply recognizing what's actually taking place in this world around us and within us. Opening our eyes to this activity as it is. We stop making things up in our head. We stop conceptualizing self and other and buying that story. And instead, we accept responsibility for our place. We accept responsibility for how we manifest in this world and in relationship. We're all intimately connected. How we manifest is a tremendous responsibility. And sometimes we live up to it. Sometimes we miss it entirely, holding on to ourselves. And this is why in Buddhism we chant these 4 bodhisattva vows. All beings without number I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions I vow to uproot. Dharma gates beyond measure I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha I vow to attain. Now, granted, this is not the best translation. I've spoken about that at length before. But essentially, there is this recognition that there is no end. We don't get to finish. Growing up, maturing, accepting responsibility doesn't start when we're 11 or 12, and it doesn't end when we stop physically growing. This process of maturation begins before we're born and continues after we've died. There's no beginning and there's no end. This is why this practice is called bodhisattva practice. The term bodhisattva is often translated as awakening being, or being of awakening. Bodhi means awake, and sattva means being. But this is to diminish this word, to give it a sort of more accurate translation. It's more like hero of awakening. Because we recognize that to embrace this path, to embrace this practice of continuously paying attention to this activity of life, continuously accepting responsibility for our relationships, for the impact that we have on this vast cosmos, is a huge task. But for me, and I hope for you as well, even the slightest glimpse of this, even the slightest inkling of what our true capacity is, that we are not limited, leads me to the place where I find that although this task can be daunting, this responsibility tremendous, for me there's nothing else to do. There's nowhere else to go. There's no one else to be. There is simply this fundamental activity of growing up into who I truly am. And for all of us, growing up into who we truly are. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.